I took it for granted at first, you know, being able to do everything. And then after the injury, it got cut in half. Nothing came easy. You had to take your time doing it.
It's hard, you know. It's all stuff that you remember like your whole life. And then you can't remember like some of the best moments of your life. I mean, those are all the things that, you know, I mean, your children's birth and your wedding. I mean, that's hard.
We were told at that point he was not going to live, he was going to be a vegetable, and you know, how we were gonna sit down and talk about donating his organs. It was horrible. It was a really horrible experience for us as parents. And I wish I could say I want to erase that at that time, but it's just something that will be with us forever.
And he went through angry, like, why aren't I 100%? And why did this happen to me? Why did that person look through his scope and pick me? Why can't I have the life I had?
And that right there is my Old Glory, which I salute. Land of the free because of the brave, because of men like me.
Over the last 2 centuries, the consequences of warfare to the American soldier have been well documented. However, in recent years, advances in body armor, combat medicine, and modern-day weaponry have quietly created a new challenge for society. A medical condition that has flown silently under the radar. Something that in many cases can be invisible to the human eye, but carries with it huge consequences. Over the next few minutes, you'll meet Tracy, Eddie, and Brian, 3 veterans of Operation Iraqi Freedom who were injured during deployment. In all 3 cases, these men returned home with the signature injury of these wars, a traumatic brain injury. What you're about to hear are some of the struggles they and thousands of other service members and veterans have had to endure on their journey back home.
I'm often asked, what is a traumatic brain injury? And a traumatic brain injury occurs when there's some external force applied to the head or to the brain that causes it to be injured. You need to realize that the brain has the consistency of formed jello in the natural state. And as the brain moves within the skull, it can be injured. It could be bruising, it could be stretching of the nerve cells, and it results in various problems. Problems with motor activity, using your arms or your legs, or it could be more commonly associated with problems with thinking, with memory, not being able to pay attention or concentrate like you were able to before.
It got so I couldn't remember a lot. You know, I could hear people talking, but I couldn't understand what they were saying. It was like all coming in as garble. And when I got back to the VA, they told me that was part of the brain injury. And I get lost a lot. It's starting to get better, but if somebody's talking too fast or something, it's like all garble, and I got to keep asking them what they said.
Reports vary about the exact number of U.S. service members serving in Iraq and Afghanistan who return home with some form of traumatic brain injury. All agree, however, that the numbers are significant. Many of these injuries will be the result of an explosion or blast and won't be identified until well after their return.
CDC, Center for Disease Control, estimates that 25% of all of the individuals who have brain injuries remain undiagnosed. That's a huge number when we're talking about the frequency of brain injury. Particularly in the military, we have to assume everybody who's been through the war is at high risk of having had a brain injury. And so these individuals may or may not have been properly diagnosed, either at the time of the IED explosion or the multiple IED explosions that they've experienced. And it's only when they go home and try to pick up the structure of their former life, without the high regimentation of the military life, that they begin to fall apart.
He didn't know he was a soldier. Yet he could look at a picture and he knew the people in them, he recognized them, but he might not have necessarily known their name, and he couldn't understand why they were in uniforms in the desert. He knew his birthday, but he didn't know how old he was. Like, I'd ask him, how old are you? And he'd just cry. But he knew his birth date. He knew I was from Canada, but he didn't remember memories from things that we did when we were dating. He knew we had 2 kids. He knew they were a boy and a girl, but he couldn't remember specific memories of things that we did with them. He'd look at pictures and he would just get frustrated, or I had videos on a laptop and he would slam it shut and he didn't want to look at it because he couldn't remember things. And then they started just coming in all different blocks that were from all different time frames, just coming at him all at once, but not in chunks of time. It wasn't when he was 5, then 6, then 7. It could be when he was 15, then 5, then Army, then, and it just started coming at all erratic time frames.
Memory loss, especially short-term loss, along with the inability to stay organized, are 2 common symptoms associated with a TBI. One of the ways that the VA is helping veterans combat these effects is with a PDA, or Personal Digital Assistant.
This is set for today. At 1:15, I got an appointment with Kendra. She's my, I don't know if you call it a masseuse or what. I go for a massage. I go every 2 weeks. She puts my ribs back into place because they pop out. 2 o'clock, I got meds. 6:30, I got a VFW meeting. 7 o'clock, I got meds.
Oftentimes, people who have a traumatic brain injury will look perfectly okay to family members or to healthcare professionals with regards to their ability to use their arms and their legs, but there is a problem with their cognition. They're going to be complaining of difficulty paying attention, irritability, mood changes.
To me, it's just almost like a child. A person can be one way one day, and they could be a different way the next. A person can be angry in the morning and be happy in the afternoon.
One of the less well understood or less recognized changes are that traumatic brain injuries can often cause problems with judgment, or reasoning, or emotional functioning, so that they can sometimes be misunderstood as psychiatric or personality changes.
So there's a lot of behavior issues, things that shocked us really, because, my son in his day would never be in my home and start cursing and calling me names, and he wasn't the type of person to do that. And he would go through stages where every other word would be a curse word. He would say things that were inappropriate, and so those are challenges, and at some point, they would be upsetting to us because we didn't know how to handle them. And with being with Eddie and understanding how he was, to a certain extent, because we don't fully understand it naturally, but understanding that redirection was the key for Eddie. And what I mean by redirection is, if he should say a curse word, we would redirect that and say, hey, how about substituting that word for something else? Or if he would hit, like I was explaining earlier, if he would hit the bed rail with his arm because he was frustrated, redirect him, say, hey, take that right hand and work the fingers. You need to work those fingers so they get working again. And so we found that redirection was the key with Eddie. And as long as we do that, he's good to go.